Welcome to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Shade Curry, and I believe every divorced woman deserves a romantic relationship where she feels safe, loved, and cherished. You can create the most amazing life after divorce, and I will teach you how. Hi, welcome everyone back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. And today I have a special treat for you as part of my Happily Remarried interview series. I have here with me Dr. Trina Dorrah, who is a medical doctor turned life coach. I will let her introduce herself and we will jump right into telling her story of divorce, dating, and getting married again. So welcome, Dr. Trina.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thank you for being here and being a guest and honoring us with your story. So I would like you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Yes. So my name is Dr. Trina Dorrah, and I am an internal medicine physician, and I have been for several years. And then recently I became a life coach as well. So I do still practice medicine. And then I am also a women's self-love and body acceptance coach. And I'm excited to be here. I have been divorced before. I got divorced 10 years ago, and I am now remarried. So I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Awesome. I am excited to get into it. I love stories. I really love stories. And I think that remarriage stories don't get told often enough. I have been surprised when I'll tell someone that, hey, I'm divorced or I'm getting divorced, or like I talk about divorce all the time. It's just part of being a divorce coach. And then someone will be like, oh, yeah, I was divorced before my current marriage, and I would have known them for years. And I wouldn't have known. Until I talked about it, I had no idea that they were divorced. So I want to highlight those stories of divorce and dating and bouncing back. So thank you for telling your story. Let's start with where you are now, your new family, your current family. What is the makeup of your remarriage?
Yes, so I've been married for 7 years at the time of this recording, and we've got 2 kids, and I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And yeah, everything is good. I'm really enjoying it.
Right. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. I'm happy. This is like what brings me the most joy is for divorced women to be able to like have this story that you have. So how long was it after your divorce that you got remarried?
It took me 3 years.
3 years. It sounds like you were like on a journey. Like you were like...
Yes, no, I very much was on a journey. I always knew I wanted to get married again. I didn't have any problem with the institution of marriage. I just always kind of believed that my marriage didn't work out, and it didn't work out with that particular guy. But I never thought that meant that marriage in general couldn't work out for me. So I definitely knew that I wanted to get married again.
Awesome. And so how did you meet your husband?
We met on Match.com, so online. Yes.
I'm a fan of online dating. I'm a fan of all kinds of dating. I do all of it. I teach my clients to go online and offline, all of it. And I really love your story because I know a lot of people have a lot of concerns about dating online. So What was that experience like for you?
Right. So my hairstylist actually was the one who was encouraging it. So she met her husband online on eHarmony. So you know how every time whenever women go to the hair salon, they're always talking to their hairstylist and, she's like, what's going on? Everyone's like, oh, I can't find anybody. And so she's like, you need to do online dating. And so she would always tell us her story about how she met her husband. And so all the women, we were like, oh, okay, well, we'll try online dating. And so I tried about 3 different services, but I did, end up meeting my husband on Match.com. But yeah, there are ups and downs for sure with online dating, just like there's ups and downs with, dating outside of online dating. Yeah, in general. So I
And
met.
you had told me where you met your ex-husband. I thought that was really interesting
Oh, yeah.
because of my clients who are always like, well, I just want to meet him organically and
Right.
whatever. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the way I met my ex-husband was actually I was talking to my cousin and her husband. They had gone to school with him. And I was like, hey, do you know any nice guys? And they were like, oh, yes, we know someone. You've got to meet him. And so they introduced me to him. And so certainly, I think that the type of relationship they had with him was very different, of course, than the type of relationship I had with him as a marriage relationship. And so to my knowledge, they are still friends, but obviously he and I are not. So
Right. You want to tell us a little bit about, like, just a brief reason why the divorce happened? Kind of why did it not work out with this nice guy that you met
right.
through your friends?
Yeah, we got married when we were not really young. I would say like my mid-20s. But one thing that I did notice was we both got advanced degrees. And so we were both kind of the mindset of, okay, we sacrificed through college, we sacrificed through our advanced degree. Now it's time to get married. Almost like that was sort of the next step. We also dated very quickly, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because my current husband, I dated in a very short amount of time. But I think had my former husband and I really taken the time to date, get to know each other, even the time we were dating, we were long distance, I think we probably ultimately would have realized maybe we should not have gotten married, but we were just kind of caught up in the whirlwind, like, oh, this is the next step. We're both professionals, let's get married. And that's kind of what you do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, 100%. So back to your dating journey. What did that look like for you? You said you used 3 different services. So that means you experienced some things that weren't like your favorite.
Yeah. And I would say that I dated in a lot of different ways. So probably the most fun way that I dated was I actually went to a speed dating event. And so you always hear about speed dating. And so I was like, you know what? What do I have to lose? Let me just try it. And it was actually a lot of fun. I did not, make a love connection at speed dating, but I did meet some pretty cool people. And we ended up, after the speed dating event was over, we all went to like a restaurant downtown and hung out. So it was, I had a nice night out and it was fun. And I got to meet some really nice people. So I did that. And then I met people just through work or other places that I went out on dates with. But I would say probably the majority of the people that I dated, I met online.
And what about, I want to hear about the other people, because, and the reason I'm highlighting the negative a little bit, even though, we don't want to focus on the positive, is that when you go out there, people talk a lot about dating horror stories. Like that's the general conversation about dating, that there are a lot of horror stories. And I love your journey because you didn't make those horror stories mean anything. Right.
Yeah. And I think you just definitely have to know going into it that what somebody else does is about them and it's not about you. So for example, I remember I went on one date. I was supposed to be going on the date. And initially I got the message that the guy was running late. So I was at the restaurant waiting. And then the waiter came over and said, oh, are you meeting so-and-so? And they were like, well, he just called. He said he's running late. And I was like, okay. Then they came back, I'm sitting at this restaurant. And of course, I felt a little self-conscious. I'm looking around. I'm like, everybody here is in love. They're all a couple. And here I am. Then they're like, oh, he called again. He said he's still running late, but he'll be here. And I was just kind of like, okay, I'd never met this guy before. Then finally the waiter comes over. You could just tell from their face. And they were like, he just called and said he's not coming. So, like that, I kind of did in that moment just feel really like devastated. I was just like, I don't know if I could get lower than this. It's like I'm divorced. I was supposed to go on this date. The guy didn't even want to meet me. He ghosted me. Now I'm in this restaurant. And then I was like, well, I don't want to just get up and leave. So then I actually stayed and ordered dinner. But the whole time I was eating dinner, I was feeling sorry for myself. I was like, I can't believe I have to eat this salmon all by myself. So that's probably that story. And then I do remember one other time when I was supposed to go on a date with a guy that I met online. And about 3 hours before the date, he messaged me and told me he had to work on his term paper. So I was like,
We're on
Probably
the
not.
same timeline here.
It was like a Saturday, and he's like, actually, I can't go out with you. I'm going to go work on a term paper. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say the emotion is that you felt after those
Right.
situations?
I definitely think that it's natural to feel some rejection, right? Like I felt rejected. And then you start to kind of question, is it about me? But that's certainly what I would want to let your listeners know is even though that's natural and normal that your first thought may be, oh, something must be wrong with me, just remember that oftentimes that first thought is wrong and it really isn't your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. Maybe this person just was not the one you were supposed to be with, and that's okay. And it just wasn't supposed to work out. But don't make it mean something larger, like, oh, I guess I have to give up on dating or I'll never find the person.
100%. 100%. I totally agree with it. And I love that. And I love kind of like your philosophy of like, yeah, these things happen, but you don't have to make them mean anything about you. I was a little like, I guess you could say, I was the way I looked at dating was that, listen, I have all the goods. I am the person bringing all the goods to the table. And so I was actually the more picky one when it came to dating. Like I didn't have a lot of dates. People talk about having like 600 dates and then they found the one. I really just tried to have fewer dates.
Right.
I talked to a ton of people. But I wanted to have fewer dates because I was like, no, I am the one who is going to make this guy's life awesome. Like anyone would be lucky to be with me. I really don't have time to be with anyone who has. So if there was even like a whiff of like, I don't know. And I mean, I it's different for everyone. I don't always recommend that because I think people are at different stages in their confidence, and there are different stages in their dating philosophy and who they are and what they want. This is like a lot of the self-exploratory work that I do with my clients. But I do think there's an element of really knowing who you are, even as you experience all of that. As you experience the rejection, taking another look at yourself like you did and being like, yeah, this sucked, but this wasn't about me.
You know, I think one thing that I would highlight is I think it's really important to make sure you've done all the healing work after your divorce before you jump back into dating. And so I would say whenever I first got divorced, I did not try to date right away. I went to see a therapist, I was getting coaching, all of those things. And then I went on my first date, or I started dating about 3 months after my divorce. And I thought that that was enough time. And what actually ended up happening was the guy I dated was very similar to my ex. And so there ended up being some trauma in that relationship that reminded me of the trauma from my prior marriage. And when that guy and I broke up, my reaction was kind of out of proportion to the relationship because I was bringing in all those old memories, from the old relationship. Yeah. And so I think that I wasn't ready to date at that time. And when that guy and I broke up, I was just like, oh my gosh. And, I really spiraled. But then later on, as I continued to work on myself, and then I did become healthier mentally, I was in a better space, I loved myself more, had higher self-esteem, all of those things, then that's whenever I was able to not take it as personally.
Right. 100%. The healing journey is super important. I get a lot of questions on, well, how long before I should date again? And I love that you didn't have a formula. Right. You went out there and you were like, oh, this experience is giving me some feedback.
Right. Yes.
I'm going to do some other things. And I've told the story on the podcast before about some of the feedback that I got when I first started dating. And it was really interesting. I think within the first or second month, I don't know, whatever, I matched with my ex on an app.
Oh, wow.
And the app was one of the ones that gives you a percentage match. 99%.
Oh, my.
I was like, you know what? Let me just pause for 1 second here.
That's
right. I was like, take it as a sign that I'm not ready.
Yeah, exactly.
So people say, well, when should I start dating? I'm like, well, you can date while you heal. You can date right away. You can wait and then date. But the important thing is that if you want to get married again, you have to engage in this process. You have to engage in actually taking action, going out there, right, and seeing what happens and experiencing that failure and learning from it and coming back and, learning new skills
Right.
that you may not have had, but you can't apply those skills without actually being in the, I guess, in the arena.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to ask a question about kind of like some of the thoughts that you had around your first marriage and all the men out there. Mm-hmm. Another thing that drives me nuts. See, I should not be allowed on the internet. My husband, whenever I've been on the internet and I come walking up to him, he knows it's probably going to be a rant. But I see things on the internet and I'm just like, why do people think this way? Right. There's a lot of thoughts about all the men out there.
Right. Yeah.
Men are all this. Men are all that. How did you kind of create an attitude and a philosophy that worked for you around who your ex was, what you had experienced, and quote unquote, all the men out there?
Right. Yeah. And maybe it was just because my parents were married for many years. As of now, they've been married 54 years. My sister and her husband have been married, I think, about 24 years. So I had other examples of men that in my life, I had friends who were married to good men. So I knew good men existed, right? So I already knew that the idea of all men are this or all men are that just wasn't true.
Okay.
And so I do think that helped that I had some positive examples. And so I was able pretty early on to say, okay, this is what my ex did, but this does not mean this is what every man out there is going to do. And so certainly I did come across some guys that I think would have done some of the same things as my ex. And it was painful, right? Like it hurt, but I still kind of had those thoughts, I guess you'll say, of there is at least one man out there for me who has what I want. And I will find him. You know, if I don't give up, if I keep going, I will find him. And I've also never believed that there is only one person in the whole world for us. Like, I actually think I could probably marry multiple people in the world. So I also kind of thought that too. Because in my mind, I was like, if there's really only one person, then, you know, how could we guarantee we're going to meet that one person in our life? So I just always said, I think there's probably multiple people I could marry. And so I'm just going to go out and meet people and find them and talk to them and know that some would be a great match, some won't, but it doesn't mean that they are my ex.
Right, 100%. And I know when we were talking in our pre-call, you had said that if you had thought that everyone was like your ex or was going to do the things that your ex did in your marriage, and if you sort of decided not to get married again because of that he would win again.
Yeah. So I definitely thought of that. I said, because, and this is probably this is probably what has happened with a lot of your listeners, but after my ex and I separated, he quickly moved on with another woman. So he was, off living his life with another woman. And I was, left in a lot of pain, having to heal. And so I said, well, I've already gone through so much pain. He's over here experiencing, whatever happiness I imagined he might have been experiencing. And so I said, if I never date again, or if I drive away, every great guy because I'm accusing them of cheating and all these other things, then my ex has won again. Like, he's won again because I still am not able to be happy because he's in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I totally agree with that. And that applies to other areas after the divorce, whether it's, money, rebuilding your life, starting the business that you want, and just enjoying yourself, right? Letting your ex sit in your head with those thoughts over and over again. It's almost like, I wasted all these years with this guy. And then you continue to waste years thinking about him, regretting. And I'm doing an episode on closure, waiting for justice. All of that can be a huge waste of time when we spend time sort of extracting quote unquote lessons, the negative lessons, and just applying them to everyone else that we meet.
Right. And I also think, and I don't remember how quickly I came around to this realization, to be honest with you. It probably was not instantly, but I did have a sense of, okay, this happened. I can't change it. What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can I help other people because of my divorce? And so I very much had this mentality of there is still a higher purpose for my life, even despite this divorce. And I think that some of that came from my religious beliefs, but just and just seeing other people in life who have gone through all kinds of struggles, not just divorce, but all kinds of struggles. Mm-hmm. And then you see them out there advocating and raising awareness and changing people's lives because of the struggle they've gone through. And so from the very beginning, I said, one day, whenever I'm healed enough, I want to use this story. I want to use my story to help other women. And so I guess that helped me to not think of that time, like we were married about 7 years, as, 7 years of my life were wasted. Because the truth was, there were some really good times during those 7 years. I have some really great memories during this. It's not like every single second was awful. I have some really great memories. There were some good times. And I'm a different version of myself now that I like better than the version I was then. And I couldn't have gotten there without the divorce. So now I actually sort of look at it in a much more positive light. I don't think of it as 7 years that were wasted.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, let's move on to the real love story. So you met your husband on Match. How did you know he was the one? Like, out of all of the swipes and all of the text conversations.
Yeah, I met him pretty quickly after so I'd gone on online dating, and then I met somebody in real life. We dated for about a year. When we broke up, I went back on online dating, and then I met my husband probably just 2 or 3 days after I was back on online dating. And, I knew I liked him from the beginning. Like, he was very open and honest. I still remember him being just very upfront and saying, like, I really like you. And he said, I want to have kids. Do you want to have kids? Like, he was very upfront. Yeah. And I remember even trying to sort of drive him away because I was like, oh, well, I'm 35. It's harder for women to have kids at this age. Are you sure you don't want to, go find someone else? And he was like, no, I read your profile. I like you. He's like, you're good. So, but yeah, I quickly knew, I actually started thinking this guy might be the one about 11 days after we went on our first date.
What was the difference between that experience, that 11-day experience, and the others that you had experienced from online dating? Because I think, and this is one of the reasons why I hesitate to sometimes, because people love formulas. They want to say, okay, you can find a guy in 11 days. Right. Like, well, there's all kinds of guys out there. And so I just want to clarify for the listeners, what was the difference between those 11 days and then the other 11 days you'd experienced? Do you wonder exactly how divorced women just like you are meeting eligible men who want a real relationship and a commitment? They're doing it by dating with their core values. Your core values are the GPS that lead you to the partner you've been looking for. When you use your core values on dating apps, text messages, and at social events, you will easily connect with your true match partner without chasing, settling, or wasting time with non-committal men. I have taught exactly how to do this in the 2-hour Core Values Dating Blueprint course available on my website, shadecurry.com/dating. That's SADECURRY.com/dating. You will learn exactly how to identify your core values and use them on your dating profile, how to ask the right questions via text, and how to tell the right stories on dates so that you attract the right people and repel those who aren't right for you. If you're ready to meet your true match, hop over to shadecurry.com/dating or click the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
So let me back up. So there was a guy that I met in online dating who, from our first conversation, we realized that we would not make a match, like a romantic match. But I thought he was really cool and he thought I was nice. And so we became friends. And so we used to talk a lot. Like, I would tell him about my dating adventures. He would tell me about his. And I remember one time talking to him about some of the struggles I was having with dating. And I was like, I have a list and I can't, find anybody, or I think I actually had found someone who matched the things on my list, but the experience was not going well at all. Yeah. And I remember my friend, he said, well, what's on your list? And so I told him what was on my list. And it was things like He had to be a certain height. He had to have certain like perfect teeth. I remember perfect teeth was on my list. It's like he needs to have 6-pack abs. He needs to have a doctorate degree. He needs to make at least 6 figures. I had this whole list. Okay. And so then my friend said, well, that's your problem right there. He's like, your list, you've got the wrong list.
I love that. I love that he said, you've got the wrong list. Because I've heard people say, well, don't have a list. And I'm like, no. You just have to have a list with what matters.
Right. Exactly. And so that really stuck with me. And so after that, I kind of revamped my list, and it was more about, the qualities of the person and that I think whenever I met my current husband, he matched those qualities. And there were certainly some things that if I were still going by my former list, then I would have excluded him. But going by my new and improved list, which was more about compatibility and the personality and those types of things, then I quickly was able to see, this is somebody who is really going to love me and be a supportive partner for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that so much. In the Dating After Divorce Academy, I work with my clients. We have like what I call the ideal partner list. And what I've done, and we actually have a sample in there, like I said, hey, this is someone who has found her person. And here was her list. And it's really, I walk them through what I call a day in the life of their relationship. Like, okay, hey, you and your partner are sitting down and you're doing finances. What qualities does that person need to bring to that scenario? Like real life scenarios, not when you're sitting down by the beach looking at the sunset, which that's amazing. It's more like when real life is happening, what are the qualities that you need? If you're sick, because most of my clients are like midlife and up, if you ever fell ill or had to have surgery, what are the qualities you want that person to bring?
Right.
Which is very different from, like you said, the height and the money and the abs and all of that. So yeah, I love that you did that.
And for me with money, I kind of ended up saying, okay, I make good money. And so I said, I don't want to make money my number one criteria. And so I did start looking, at some of these other things, like you said, like if I'm sick, is this person going to be there for me? And that's who I'm married to right now. Like my husband is wonderful and he loves me no matter what I look like. My weight has fluctuated throughout our marriage. My hair has changed, all kinds of things have changed. And every single day he's always like, hey, sexy. Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, I love you. Like, it's like he doesn't even notice any of the changes.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, what I did when it came to money was something similar. I made good money. I was making I was working a corporate job at the time, but I was making the money that I wanted to make in that role. And the quality that I then put down was someone who loves what they do. Someone who loves the work that they do and they're enjoying the work that they do. Right. Whether it's some combination of working and entrepreneurship or whatever it is. When they wake up in the morning, they have just this great attitude towards work and they're busy and they're doing it. So it was just a lot of those intangible qualities.
Right.
You can't get from a dollar figure.
Exactly. Well, and a lot of times, not everyone, but a lot of times if somebody's making a lot of money, they may also be working very hard for that money. And so then they may not be around all the time to just hang out with you and go out to eat or be around for your kids if you have kids. And so, I think it's worth, thinking about all of those things.
100%. I love that. All right. I'm going to ask you, what's been the most surprising thing for you? Like you had an idea of what it would be like to get married again. Now that you've been married and you have the kids, do you ever think back and say, I didn't expect this? Like this was surprising, whether good or bad. For me, a lot of my surprises are like good surprises. Some of them are like, oh, I wasn't expecting this. But
I do have a funny story. I like telling people this story. So like I said, initially my husband and I were going back and forth because on these online dating apps, you don't have to give people your real email initially. You don't have to give them your phone number. So we were going back and forth on the match.com email. And so whenever he said he wanted to have kids, and at that time, I honestly wasn't sure if I wanted kids. I didn't have kids with my first husband, and I really wasn't sure. So that's when I was kind of like, well, are you sure you don't want to date a younger woman? I'm 35. And then he said, no, I really like you, but are you open to artificial insemination? Okay, so this is what he writes me on the email. He's like, I looked at your profile. I like you, but would you be open to artificial insemination? And I was like, wow, that's a really forward question for someone who I've never met, but okay, sure. And so then fast forward, and we ended up having to use IVF for both of our kids. So I'm like, well, there you go. He asked me from the very beginning.
Right. He thought ahead, like,
right.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so it's not, I was like, well, I told him when we were dating, I'd be open to this.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And I love that you are in the family that you wanted and that you created
right.
the dream that you went for. I love your story. I want to thank you so much for sharing it with my listeners, because
you're welcome.
This is the after that we were all looking for, that they're all looking for. And I love that you've been willing to tell them that this is possible. For them. So I know currently you're working as a self-love and women's empowerment coach. Mm-hmm. How does self-love and empowerment, like specifically for a dating journey, like where would you see self-love coming? I mean, I can go in there. I have a module in the Dating After Divorce Academy on self-love, but I really want to hear from someone who focuses on just that.
Right. Yeah. And it's just from my own personal journey. I had to learn to love myself before I really could have a successful relationship with anyone else. Mm-hmm. And I went through a lot of trauma in my first marriage. And there definitely, whenever I exited that marriage, my self-esteem, my self-love was very low. Like I had absorbed a lot of those messages that my ex had told me. And then I had told myself a lot of things as well. And I believed those things. And so I really don't think I would have been able to get married or have a successful marriage had I not really focused on trying to improve and find that self-love and self-worth and, all of that. Yeah. That was, I think, crucial, because otherwise, even had I gotten married again, that would have still manifested, all the things that come along with having a low sense of self-worth, a low self-esteem, that would have still been showing up in the new marriage. And I think it would have made it very difficult for my husband and difficult for us to have a successful marriage. And so I think it's essential to work on that and really have your self-worth as high as it possibly can be as you're going through this dating journey.
Yeah. What would you say, where does this show up most for your clients? Mm-hmm. Self-love, like if they when they're working with you, typically what do they come with?
Right. So I'm really interested in self-love and body acceptance. So I really like working with women who, maybe have had, well, you don't even have to have had children in our society to not love yourself and love your body. But particularly in my age group, a lot of the women that come to me, they've had children. They think about how they used to look in high school or college, how they used to look before children. And so it's very hard. Like they're having a really hard time loving the way their bodies looks now. Right. And, we're not really intended as people to look the exact same our entire life. But I think through the media and even stories that we tell ourselves, we think we are supposed to look the exact same. Like we think if we wore a size whatever when we were 17, we should still be wearing it when we're 47 and have had 4 kids. And so that's what I love to focus on, the body acceptance, self-love, and then also breaking free from that diet mentality and that culture that tells us we always have to be on a diet and we always have to be trying to lose another 5 pounds. And we can't eat anything that we actually enjoy or want to eat because it has, 200 calories or whatever. So those are the things that I really am passionate about talking about.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I have worked with women who, said, well, I don't want to start dating until I'm a certain weight. And so they're putting it off, or there are events coming in their lives, or there are, things they want to work on, but it's sort of like the weight is like this, like milestone that they have to get to before, kind of like before life can begin.
Right. And when you think about that, a lot of that comes from the thoughts, right? Because you're thinking, okay, well, if I lost 20 pounds, then I would think I was sexy. I would think I was beautiful. And so then I would go shopping and buy this outfit. And then I could go to that event and I would walk in and be like, oh yeah, look at me. But it's still all thoughts. And so what I would tell people is those thoughts are available to you now. And a personal example from my own life. So I know your listeners can't see me, but this dress that I have on right now, I bought this dress as it was a kind of a challenge. I felt similarly. I was like, once I lose some weight, then I'll go buy myself a new dress. Well, I decided to go buy the dress before I lost the weight. And just the act of buying the dress, putting the dress on, putting something on, that's beautiful, treating my body like it's beautiful the way it is now makes me feel so much more beautiful, makes me feel so much sexier. So that's what I would suggest to your clients is I understand where that thought comes from, that if only I could lose weight, then I can begin my life. But I would encourage them, just like I went ahead and went and got the dress and I'm wearing it now because I feel really beautiful in it. I want to encourage them, don't wait. Go ahead and start going to those events and living their life and doing those things.
Yeah, that is amazing. Thank you so much. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell all the listeners, we're going to link up all of Dr. Trina Dorrah's information in the show notes, or you can just Google her name, Dr. Trina Dorrah, and find her on the internet. She is a life coach. We actually went to the same life coach school, so we are kind of like life coach school sisters. Check out her work online, follow her on all of the social media platforms that will be linked up. Dr. Trina, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And just for the people who want to write down how they can find you now and not wait for the show notes, can you tell us where they can find you online?
Yes. So my website is Dr. Trina Dorrah. So it's DrTrinadorrah.com. And so they can go to my website, and then I have links to my Facebook and my Instagram from my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I want to just acknowledge you for your openness and your willingness to share your story so openly. I know this is not easy for everyone. Usually when we're done with this divorce thing, we're like, hey, I want to lock this up and forget it ever happened. But telling our stories, I think, really just helps the next generation of women who are coming behind us, helps our sisters, really elevates women everywhere. And I know you've done that on this podcast. I know you're doing it in your work every day. So thank you. And everyone, thank you for your time and attention today. And we will see you next time. Thanks for listening today. If you are ready to get married after divorce, I want to invite you to download my free 8-video training specifically designed to help divorced women date with ease and get married again. Head over to SadeCurry.com to get started. That's SadeCurry.com. I'll see you inside.